One of the things that I am most passionate about is that we need to start to do divorce differently. We need to do it with less casualties involved. We need to do it with less hurt, less pain, less ongoing conflict. And today's guest is all about divorce without destruction. Let's get started. Welcome to the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast dedicated to helping women navigate the emotional journey that is divorce. I'm your host, Erica, and if you're trying to figure out life after the big D, welcome to the club. Whether you're contemplating divorce or dealing with the aftermath or any of the many phases in between, the club has got you covered. Each week, you'll hear stories from women who have been in your shoes. This isn't about spilling tea on divorce details. This is about giving you the tools to take control of your own healing journey. Listen in weekly for advice, tips, and tools to help you move through each stage of the process. Welcome to another episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club. I'm your host, Erica, and today I have Jaime Davis with us. Now, Jaime, I looked at your bio and I laughed a little bit because this was the short bio. And the list of certifications and accomplishments and awards that you have won are absolutely outstanding. You guys, she's a certified family law specialist. She's a family financial mediator. She's a certified parenting coordinator. She's got awards around family law, around Pro Bono Honor Society, all the things. And on top of it, she wrote a book. She wrote a book. She hosts a podcast. So, welcome, Jaime. I am so excited to have you here today to talk about how we can do divorce differently.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So, you guys, Jaime hosts a podcast called A Year in the Day, Year and a Day, the same title as her book. And it is really focused on how to do divorce without destruction. So, before we jump into the big topic we really wanted to talk about today, which was these 5 steps or 5 areas to navigate divorce without destruction, I just want to give a shout out to your book, Jaime, because so often when people are in those beginning phases, do I get divorced or do I not? Or, I had a call the other week and the woman's like, what's it going to look like for me? I'm like, well, I handle the emotions. The lawyer's got to handle the business. And so when I got your book and I read through it, what I loved about it is how easily it broke down all of the big areas for you to start to think over. And now, of course, you guys know that divorce law is kind of different in each state where people can support you or not support you. But this book gives you the framework to kind of start to flag or tag things or be like, okay, is this a thing that I need to look into? Is this a thing that I can further learn about? It was super easy. I think I sat down and I read it like in a night instead of watching TV. I highly recommend. You guys will link the book down below, but I do recommend if you're trying to figure out all of those beginning points of the business of divorce, definitely check out A Year and a Day by Jaime Davis. So, hats off to you for putting together a very easy to read, concise, informative book.
Well, thank you so much for that. I had noticed in consultations with my clients, our time is pretty limited. Typically, they last about an hour and a half, and that is just not enough time to give folks all of that basic information that they need about how divorce law works in their state. And so I thought the book would be a really good resource for folks to come into that consultation with some of that basic knowledge already so that they could ask questions about their particular situations.
Yeah, and isn't that true? Because by the time you get to the lawyer, right? The lawyer is not cheap per hour. And you've never navigated this before. So you don't know what you don't know. And if you're waiting to use those sessions with your lawyer as really the beginning research and I'm just trying to figure it out, you can really start to add up a lot of hours versus have a little foresight, have a little information. You don't have to have all the answers. That is why you're hiring a lawyer. But being able, like you even start with a chapter on before you even separate things to start to think about. So it really starts all the way, how do you pick a mediator? Let's see, how should I communicate with my children? You guys, it's full of all of these questions that I know that you are asking. What kind of evidence do you generally obtain through private investigators? It's the questions you're all wanting to ask. And instead of just Googling it or talking to Chat GPT, she gives you a great place to start. Then you're informed and you're educated to now go work with your legal team and your lawyer to figure out what needs to happen in your specific case. All right. So here's what we wanted to talk about today. So when I first sat down and chatted with Jaime has a 5-step framework to navigate divorce without destruction. And I think just even that topic, right? For me, when I sat down and I looked at it, I was like, I don't want anybody to lose in this situation. We're both hurting. We're both already really hurt, quote unquote, broke by the end of the marriage. There was a kid in the middle. How do we do this without causing more pain? Because the reality is you're going to have to continue to work with this person if you've got kids. If there's kids, that just because the papers get signed, nothing changes, you guys. You still have to text them. You still have to figure out parenting agreements. You still have to be able to parallel parent, if not collaborative co-parenting, to be able to create what is your kid's childhood and the rest of their life. So why don't you first start, Jamie? Give us an overview of what those 5 steps are, and then we'll see where the conversation leads us to dig into them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first thing I want to say is, it is not possible to keep every single family law case out of the courtroom, but there are things that you can do as you embark upon this journey to make it less destructive to your family, to your finances, to your relationships. And so, throughout my 23 years of practice, I had noticed the negative impacts that highly contentious divorces and litigation were having on families. And I also noticed that there were some folks who were able to settle their cases on their own. And I had noticed in those cases where the folks were able to get things resolved that there were certain themes that I would see over and over. And so that's kind of how the 5 step framework was born. Just looking over cases I had handled and seeing the ones that had ended in a fairly amicable manner. Again, that's not to say that every case can stay out of the courtroom, but a lot of them can. So, the first thing that I think is important, the first step of the framework is how you separate can set the tone for the whole divorce. And so, you need to do some planning. And I think there's 3 different areas that you need to plan in. I think you need to plan emotionally. I think you need to plan legally. And you also need to plan financially. What I mean by that, when you're planning emotionally, are you actually ready to get a divorce? Or are you still questioning it? That's okay. Lots of folks spend a lot of time trying to decide whether or not to separate or stay married. And if you are on that fence and you're not sure, I highly recommend couples counseling, individual counseling to figure that out before you utter those words to your spouse. Because once you say, hey, honey, I want a separation, it's really hard to take those words back. And so just make sure that you have done that emotional planning to make sure that you really are ready. I think you also need to plan legally, like I mentioned, and that involves having a consultation with an attorney. You don't have to hire the attorney if you're very early on in the process, but at least go get some of that basic information so that you know what to expect if you do decide to proceed with a separation. And finally, do a little financial planning. And I don't mean, go hire a financial advisor necessarily, but know what you have. Start finding the financial documents that you have in your home or online, your tax returns, your bank statements, credit card statements, investment account statements, all of those things, because your lawyer is going to ask you about those anyway. And so you may as well do your homework ahead of time. Have an idea about what the monthly budget is, how much you and your spouse spend, how much you guys earn. You're going to need all of this information as you proceed with the separation anyway. And interestingly, sometimes once you tell your spouse you want a separation, some of this information starts to disappear. So go ahead and get a copy of what you might have in the home before talking to your spouse about separation.
Yeah, those were so crucial. I would say we didn't do those right, but I had an overall very amicable divorce process. And so thank God, my ex, other than continuing to lie about the other woman, so we had a very huge lack of trust issue going on. He wasn't hiding things. He wasn't trying to take things, but he moved out while I was out to dinner with a friend. He told me to go out and relax. And I came home and the house was empty of his stuff. He had been like researching and applying for rental places without letting me know. Those sorts of things caused huge emotional upheavals almost instantly. I mean, we even tried, I was like, can you just fake it? Stay until our son goes to bed every night. Cause he'd pick him up from school. We'd come home and still have dinner. I'm like, stay until he goes to bed so that our son doesn't know. because I was still in disbelief that this was going to be a reality. That was not the right answer, you guys. It made it so much longer and harder and more problems with our 4-year-old at the time instead of just being able to move forward. And I found there were, I worked, I had my own, company issued at that point. There was a pension or there's a 401k. There was money that aunts and uncles had opened when we had our son. I didn't even know where all the money lived because I just was like, is it like I have the paperwork's in the filing cabinet? I don't know. I didn't know what all the logins were. I didn't know where everything was going because we had trusted each other to just take care of it. And so it actually was really insightful. At first, I avoided it. But then when I finally started pulling it, I was like, oh my gosh, there's actually so much more here in a really good way than I understood. I found college investment accounts for my son that I had forgotten about. I found I had a pension account I didn't even know about, like these things. But again, thank God my ex, we didn't touch anybody's retirement money. He had his and I had mine. And that's not always the way that it goes. In those starts of documents, people start to move money out of accounts. People start to hide accounts. They start to create their own accounts. So just protect yourself, not because you're thinking it's going to go terrible, but then you have the facts. You have the facts before things get heated and before they get emotional.
Absolutely. And that's where I think talking to an attorney can help because they can guide you about steps you can take to protect joint assets. Like you mentioned, sometimes, in some cases, not yours, thankfully, but money can get moved out of those joint accounts. And that can be really hard on the spouse who may not have access to, the funds once they've been moved. So,
Yeah, I mean, I have had people message in and they're like, "What am I supposed to do?" Because he's the primary breadwinner and he's locked all the money. And so I have no money to actually be able to live off of. And then there are some weird, then you start getting all the weird requests, which I think really don't, like, oh, buying gift cards, stashing this away. Like, I don't think any sort of lying is good. I think that's when you work with the lawyers to figure out what you legally can get access to. Nobody should be worried that they can't afford things. One person shouldn't lock up all the funds or steal money or do something, but sadly those things do happen.
yeah, so I mean, it does happen. And, the best
Mhm.
thing is to be prepared for that. And the other thing I will add is that if you are the spouse who has been thinking about separation and you've had a lot of time to process it, when you have that first conversation with your spouse, probably this is going to be much like how you felt. That person has not been thinking about this. It was the last thing on their mind. They never thought a separation would even be in the picture. And so you need to give them time to catch up with you emotionally to where you are, to understand that, hey, it is going to happen. This is going to be a new reality. And so if that's the kind of situation you're in and you're the spouse that wants the separation, in that first conversation, that's probably not the time to start talking about finances and details and custody schedules and all that stuff. You have the initial conversation first. Make sure your spouse understands you, that you're serious. Give them a little bit of time to process and then go into some of the more nuanced details of the situation.
So crucial because I think what people run into a lot more issues when they try and move things along faster than what the other person is ready to. And
Yeah,
sometimes just a little grace, just a little space gives them that time to process to be ready to move forward.
absolutely.
All right, what's our step 2?
All right. So, step two. So, you're getting your plan together. You need to assemble your support team. And there are lots of different members on the support team. Of course, there is the divorce lawyer. Then you're going to want to have a therapist, divorce coach, financial advisor. You might need some valuation experts if there are family businesses or real estate that need to be valued. And you're also going to want to have a good friend on your team, somebody that you can talk to, somebody that can help keep you grounded, somebody that can, help take your mind off things when the stress is just too much. And I think having all of these folks together to support you, step two.
I love that. And I found that I didn't always go to the same friends, right? I had like 3 core friends. I knew when I really needed, like, I was down and I really needed somebody to just tell me it was going to be okay. I knew which friend to go to. When I needed the hype friend who was like, screw that. He's an asshole. Pick yourself up, right? I went to a different friend. I love acknowledging that your team is not just the business. Again, you guys, there's a business of divorce and there's an emotional process of divorce. And, it's not like one starts and then when it's done, the next one begins. They kind of run parallel to each other, but a lot of times we don't look at the emotional aspects until the business part is done. And all of a sudden we're left in whatever pieces we need to try and pick up. So I will say, if you guys are feeling like you do not have the right support system or the right the friends, the family. My family tried their hardest and they actually did a really good job, but they also had their own feelings about how it felt knowing that my ex had cheated. That always colors the support somebody can give. We have the club. You guys can join the community, the private community that we have through the podcast. It's not legal advice. This is friendship and emotional. This is helping you when you need somebody else to hold you up till you get your feet underneath you. The club is going to be your place to find that support and to find those friends that understand it while you're assembling all the other experts that need to be on your team. Step 3. What's step 3?
All right. So, step 3 is going to take us to goal setting. You need to get clear on what's most important to you and be willing to let go of the rest. I see all too often in cases folks that get really bogged down in every single issue and everything becomes a battle. It doesn't need to be. I always tell folks figure out what are the 3 things you want to walk away from this with. And let's focus on those, especially when it comes to personal property. There really is no point in continuing to fight over something that may not even have meaning anymore. One of my prime examples is the wedding china. For whatever reason, folks can get really bogged down in the wedding china. And I just want to be like, you guys didn't even use it while you were married. Like, why do you both want it now? Like, who cares? Buy some more plates. But I see lots of people wasting their resources fighting over things that are completely replaceable. Another story that I sometimes tell is about a mediation I was in, and this is a true story. It came down to a Dyson vacuum cleaner. And I literally offered to go to the store and buy my client a vacuum cleaner so that we could get the case settled. Because for whatever reason, that couple $100 vacuum was the make it or break it of this, multi-million dollar case. So
Yeah.
people can really get bogged down in that stuff.
I think again, the emotions are the business, you guys. We get fueled and triggered by an emotion to prove that we were right. That
Absolutely.
I wanted this wedding set. You didn't even want these plates. Why do you want them now? I mean, I would ask you, when are you actually going to sit down and eat on them again? The engraved cake server that you get and the champagne glasses. I was like, these can go. There's not a time when I'm going to roll these back out for like my next wedding. Like, this is not happening. And we do get stuck and we lose sight of why we're doing what we're doing. And so I love setting those clear goals. I love picking 3. I think mine would have definitely been making sure that we're both financially okay, making sure that we are able to move forward into a healthy relationship after. Those 2, even if I just remember that second one, hey, Erica, you want to be able to work with him? Why are you fighting over this stuff? And the irony, either way works. When my ex packed up and left, he literally just took like his clothes. He left all the stuff in the kitchen. He left his golf clubs. I mean, he was like, I don't want any of it. Just do whatever you want. And I felt bad because I'm a little bit too nice. And I was like, but your golf clubs, like, you should probably come back and get those. And he did. But I remember at first being so relieved that I didn't have to go spend more money to buy new pots and pans and things like that. And then I remember like 6 months into the separation being so annoyed that he got to go get all new pots and
Right.
pans and I was still using the ones that we had gotten at as wedding gifts. So it just comes down to, why are you fighting for something? Why is something so important? Because when you can unlock that, I mean, I had the example of the couple was fighting over a TV and they were stuck in legal battles long after, just over the TV. And so being able to give in to some of those, and I'll say give in because I know that will trigger you. You're not giving in. You are choosing to take your power back, but it feels like you're giving in the moment.
Well, and I hear a lot the principle of the matter. And frankly, fighting for the principle of the matter is very, very expensive. And when it comes to divorce, and you've said this several times already, it's the business and the emotion. And the legal part of divorce needs to be a smart business decision. The emotion needs to be taken completely out of it. In a little while, we'll talk about child custody, and that's a whole different ballgame. But when we're talking about dividing property and spousal support, you need to make a sound business decision and keep your emotions out of it to the extent that you can.
If you've been struggling to find the right support to help you figure out what your next step is, the club is your answer. Launching this summer, we'll be hosting a private divorce group for you to get the support, the inspiration, and the guidance you need to be able to find the answers for you to finally move forward. No matter if you are unhappily married, trying to figure out what those next steps are, or in those early phases of separation and divorce where it feels like a constant uphill battle and you just want to get your feet underneath you, the club is going to be your place. Every single month, I offer support calls, networking calls to meet other women, and a signature program to guide you from confusion to clarity. On top of that, my most favorite part is every quarter, I'm going to send you a healing gift. You get a kit full of tools, support items, things to help you on your healing journey. The club is going to open up this summer, so make sure to get on the wait list. The link is in the show notes so that you have early access. I love that. It is, you guys, you're literally moving into what was a love match, right? If we use some romance TV thing, but you had a love relationship and you're moving into a business relationship. How would you treat this if this was a business partner at work? If you were having a meeting with somebody at work, how would you speak to them? If you were trying to negotiate how you were dividing a project at work, how would you divide it? It's the same thing. And we forget that because this is somebody who had the, you know, most intimate seat to your life. And now they're moving into a different role. So let's talk about number 4 because that gets into your kids.
Yeah. So, step 4 of the 5 step framework is staying focused on what's in the best interest of the children. In North Carolina, where I practice, judges tend to lean toward 50-50 custody schedules unless there is some compelling reason why one parent is not fit and suitable. Maybe they have a drug or alcohol issue or something like that. A lot of folks can get stuck in the roles that were created during the marriage. Like if one spouse stayed home and primarily took care of the children and the other spouse worked, it doesn't mean the working spouse can't take care of the child. It just means that wasn't their role in the partnership. And so trying to get parents to realize that their co parent is capable of caring for the child, I think is huge. And if you stay focused on what's in the best interest of the child, it will always serve you well. Research shows that children benefit from having both parents involved in their lives. And so, to the extent that you can consider what will provide your children stability and consistency, your children are only going to be better off for that.
Yeah, I love that. This one, you guys, can be a really hard one to do. And there's a few key pieces that I always want people to remind themselves is one, you can't control how the other parent is going to parent. And so sometimes we step up, especially as the mom, and I did this and I was like, well, you need to show up differently. You need to be more present. You need to be more emotionally available. Our son is going through this divorce. He's having all these feelings, right? And a lot of our arguments stemmed because I was still trying to control things that weren't up to me. And I had to take a step back and I had to really ask myself and say, is my son safe? Is he healthy? Is he loved? Okay, he is. I got to let the rest of the stuff go. This is part of their path. I can be there for my son when he comes back. I can create, we have a very open communication. Probably some days I'm like, good Lord, can you tell me a little bit less as we're moving into these teenage years? But that was how I could still support my child. I can't control what happens at the other house. Again, you guys, the asterisk of like, if there's actual abuse or things that are threatening the safety of the children, we're not talking about that level. We're talking about the normal amount where we're like, you didn't feed them organic food and you let them have McDonald's all weekend with you and you didn't put them to bed on time. We're talking about these things. You can't control what happens at the other house. And your kid is going to have feelings too. And your kid is going to have days where they don't want to go to the other parent's house. And they are going to have all the emotions as to why they don't want to. And I had to remind myself that what was really important is I did not want to be the one that stood in the way of the quality of relationship my ex had with our son. That was up to him. But I did not want to be the one to blame. So when my son had to go to his dad's, was he always happy about it? No. Is he still always happy about it? No. But for a lot of years, I was like, reflect back their feelings. I understand. I know that it's hard to have two houses. I know that it's hard to go to dad's when you want to be here, and your dad loves you. And this is really important time for you guys. And it sucks to have to be the one to make those conversations. But of that bigger goal of what's in the best interest of my child, I know that I want him to have the opportunity to have a relationship with his dad. And I've watched it continue to evolve over the years. And that is not my right to block or take away. And it means you are going to have to support it. And I think when, again, parents start acting like kids, well, he lied or he hurt me, or I don't, why should I have to do these things for him? You're not doing them for your ex. You're doing it for your kids. You're doing it because your kids love both parents. They do. And so don't put them in a position to have to choose one. Make sure they know it's okay that, yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's different than what any of us thought, but we both really love you.
I love to hear you say that so much because so many people have a hard time doing that. If you are truly focused on what's in the best interest of your child, you are going to want him to be happy wherever he is, mom's house, dad's house, whatever the situation is. And we see this a lot too with like new significant others. The parent has a tendency to want to jade the child toward the new significant other, you know what I mean? But if you remember, if you can have as many people love your child as possible, that's a good thing for your child, provided the person is a fit and suitable person. There's no reason your child should hate that person just because your ex is with them now.
Yeah, and you guys definitely have some experience with that. So let's give you some examples. Some of those interesting spots I had to catch myself. So remember we went back to get clear on what's important. My ex, the other woman stayed. They ended up kind of getting engaged almost right away. They were engaged about 6 years before that dissolved too, but she kind of showed up right away and almost moved in right away, and all of a sudden there was a third adult trying to parent with their own desires and their own wishes. And a lot of the things that she would do would really hurt and irritate me. And I'm sure the things I did hurt and irritate her. And I had to catch myself because, I'd get my son back and I'd ask questions. But my son knew the energy behind the questions. So I had to stop asking. I had to instead say, I hope you had a really good time with your dad and her name, right? And if he chose to start opening up about that, I was listening and I would talk about, wow, like she really liked roller coasters. God, I hate roller coasters. I was so grateful. I was so grateful and annoyed because my kid would come home and be like, oh my gosh, she took me to this amusement park and then she took me to this candy store and I got all this stuff, right? And of course, my little mom heart's breaking because of jealousy, of insecurity. Like, is he going to love her more? And again, it was the let's be happy for him that this person is being kind,
Right.
is being caring, is trying to build a relationship with him. And it really was, I had to remind myself, you know, she has a good heart, but we aren't perfect. So thank God I could see like at least there were some pieces in there that were trying to align to similar core values. But gosh, did we choose to handle things a lot differently? Or I will tell you guys the other thing that came up is I got a call from her that my little child, tiny 5-year-old, slapped her when she told
Oh,
him to finish eating his cereal and he didn't want to eat it. And so I got a call. And now you, as the adult, have to sit in a place of like, wow, that is unacceptable for my child. Am I, yes, on one side, right?
mm,
But at the same time, I have to look at what are the core values that I want to instill in my child. And it doesn't matter who the person is. This is not okay. Talk to my son. What happened? Why did you get so upset? Well, she wouldn't let me leave the table and she said I had to finish this meal, right? And all the frustrations of a child going through divorce who now has a new quote unquote parent in the room that they don't want. And so you have to be able to put yourself aside because you will be working with some sort of significant other on some level and you won't do it the same. We didn't do it the same. And it was really rough for a lot of years because of that. But again, let go of what I cannot control, choose to see the best in people, and then, be there to help my son navigate what this looks like.
absolutely. I love that.
Number 5. What's our last one?
All right. So, saving the best for last. I think this gets overlooked all too often, but you really do need to prioritize your own emotional health and practice self care. And
Yeah.
self care looks different for everybody. It can be anything. It can be exercise, it can be hanging out with your girlfriends, it can be going to therapy, taking medication, whatever self care is to you. You really need to lean into that. And there's a few reasons for that. There are lots of decisions as a lawyer I can make for my client, but there are some decisions I'm just not qualified to make. I can't tell my client whether or not they want to accept a settlement proposal. I can't tell them what custody schedule will be best for their particular child. And I need my client to be emotionally healthy enough where they can make really good decisions. I mean, this is a time in your life where you are going to be asked to make decisions that could impact you for the rest of your life.
Yep.
You're dividing your property, you're talking about spousal support and child support, and you're deciding what schedule is going to be best for your child. And so, you need to make sure that you are in a place where you can make really good decisions about those things and aren't still spinning from the stress and anxiety of the separation itself. So, self care is crucial in these cases.
It's so interesting too because just I think it was yesterday I posted a, question in stories and I was like, "What have you done to invest in yourself? Like what are you doing for self-care?" In the first comment that came back in, it did say, "This is actually a really hard question. I don't know. I don't know where to start on this." And I think there's two reasons for that. I think we've seen a lot of marketing lately around self-care, right? Like self-care is what you treat yourself with. Self-care is the yoga clothes you buy. Self-care is the yoga class you go to. There is no set rules as to what self-care is. It is a thing that makes you feel at peace and you feel love for yourself or how you're choosing to spend your time. It is something that when it's done, you feel a little bit recharged. You don't have to feel ready to run a marathon, but do you feel like you put the weight down of all of the heavy, stressful junk that's going on in your life? And self-care can change. So I am having a really stressful work season. I've got a big project, lots of writing, hours and hours of hard creative writing. And I cannot go and do a hard, heavy weightlifting at the gym. So even though that's my self-care, I have adapted to say, you know what I need right now? I need some sun salutations. I need a walk outside. Sometimes I just need a nap. It's one of my favorite self-care things. We think that it's like cheating or something, like naps are wrong. No, like toddlers have it right. Naps are the best thing ever. Give yourself a nap, even a 15-minute nap. But self care is just choosing to say, I want to do something that is strictly for me because it makes me feel better while I'm doing it or after I've done it. And you should be looking for ways to do that every day. How can you find 5 minutes for yourself every single day? And it starts to transform how the rest of the minutes in your day run.
Absolutely. And I will caution if you are involved in a family law case, especially a child custody case, it is critical that you avoid resorting to self medication. Don't turn to alcohol or drugs for that quick fix because that can potentially be used against you, especially in your custody case. So find something healthy that makes you feel better, not necessarily that glass of wine.
Yeah, the tricky part about alcohol and drugs and whatever else you guys is all it is an avoidance mechanism.
Right.
So we do it because we think if we look at the pain, it's going to hurt even worse than the fear of what looking at the pain looks like. Okay. I know that didn't make a lot of sense, but here we are. We're sitting in our little human forms and our ego that's telling us we need to prove that we're right. And how wrong was he in this? Right. Also tells us a story that if you really looked at how badly he hurt you, you might not survive. Your heart might break into a million pieces. And so it tries to avoid allowing you to actually look at it. But when you have the right support system, when you have a therapist or a friend, when you're doing the self care, you can start to look at these big wounds, the inner work that needs to be done. And piece by piece, you start to look at it and you say, yeah, that sucked. This hurt. And I made it through. There were pieces that I avoided processing that come up right now, you guys. And I am 10 years past separation, 8 years past divorce final. I didn't know they were still in there. They are memories that pop up that in the moment were so incredibly painful that my system could not deal with it. And so when our system can't deal with it, what do? We lock it up, we shut it down, we put it somewhere else. And alcohol or drugs enables us to be like, oh, look, see, I feel okay. I feel totally fine. I don't need to look at any of that. Here's the tricky part. After the high, it feels even worse. So you've had a couple drinks. The next morning, I can guarantee your anxious, worried thoughts are probably worse than they were before you had the cocktail. Same thing if you're in one of the states where pot is legal, right? And you're like, I'm just going to smoke a little bit. I'm just going to relax a little bit. It has to deal with uh, what the emotional ladder. Okay, you're here. Here's the top of the ladder. We're in the middle, and you don't feel very good. You're on the negative side. You're sliding down. You're like falling into the hole. And so you go, I'm just going to use a little substance. I'm going to have a cocktail. What's the cocktail to? You forget about the problems enough that you like feel like you've reached up a higher rung on this ladder. You've climbed back out of the hole. But the next morning when you wake up, you feel worse because you saw how good it felt to finally let the stuff go. But when you're sober again, the stuff is still there. And so while it really hasn't changed how intense it is, it feels more intense because you faked it the day before with alcohol. So put that stuff aside. We've all been there. I've talked about it. In fact, I actually I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that one, but I had a 2-part series with a woman who became the mocktail mommy, which was all about, she's like, look, guys, I did it all wrong. It's DUIs and in jail and like all the things, and using that alcohol to just avoid the issues. So there are a lot more effective ways. We all have occasional drinks. Just if you notice that it's happening a lot, I noticed my problem was is I noticed that I'd get home from school or get home from work, and I just wanted to have one vodka soda water, but that one cup kept getting bigger. And then I finally realized that I was like, oh, I'm really having a hard time just getting through the night without crying or doing whatever else without it. And I was like, we should probably let it go then. Then we should stop, because it was a crutch. It was enabling me to continue to not deal with my stuff instead of starting to look at it piece by piece.
Well, and you want to make sure too that you're setting yourself up for success for your next chapter. I mean, we've talked about, the downsides of separation and divorce, but there can be a bright side. You get a chance for a do over. You get to
Mm.
do things that you want to do that maybe your spouse wasn't into, traveling or whatever it is. And so make sure that you're keeping yourself healthy so that you have the best chance at your second chapter.
I love that. And I think that's just such a fun topic to kind of wrap up this episode on. You guys, there's a lot as you're going through divorce that is ending. But every end, right? What is closing time? Is that semisonic, right? We always remember that song if you're from a certain age. But every ending is a new beginning. And so while you are looking at the things that are about to change, also start to think about what are the new and exciting things that are going to. I definitely in the separation found, I signed up at Lifetime. I love Lifetime. It's just a great, if you have one near you, I love those little clubs. Life spas, I love those too. But got into their alpha program, right? Started lifting, found a group that showed up every single week. We weren't deep personal friends, but we were cheering each other on and we were hitting new goals, right? And so that brought back a lot of strength. Oh, I can do this. If I can get through this workout, I can get through the next heavy thing I have to lift in this process of divorce. And not only that, but there is just the right, left, the bilateral releasing emotions, heavy workout, crying in the car. There is some reality to that, but it also brought back a lot of confidence. Like, hey, if I can do this, I can do it other places. And so I traveled a ton. I had space to figure out who I was and what I wanted. Those times when my son was at his dad's at first really hurt, but then became this beautiful gift. Like it was a reset. Oh my gosh, you mean I could sleep all day? You mean I could watch what I want to watch on TV? You mean I don't have to be caring for anybody else? All of these things can be both exciting or painful. It depends on how you want to see it. And so there's a time when they're going to be both. It was painful when my son went to his dad's, but all of a sudden I started to cherish that time because I was able to now reinvest in myself, to take the naps, to unplug, to do the self-care so that I could then be the best mom when he came back.
It's all about perspective.
It's all about perspective. And you guys, on a funny note, I will say now that we're sitting in moved in with the boyfriend, now there are 4 boys running around. And so we are like, "Oh, is this a child-free weekend? Did we finally have a child-free weekend again?" And so it's very funny because, when you're in it, you're like waiting for the time when it's over. And then when it's over, you wish that those things would sometimes come back.
Yep.
And the lesson is to just always see, how is it a gift? And yes, how is it hard? But that's okay because it isn't forever. Everything continues to change and evolve. So I want to thank you, Jaime, for walking us through those 5 steps. Again, you guys, it's how to separate, sets the tone, assemble your team, get clear on what's important, stay focused on the best interests of your kids, and prioritize self-care. You can check out Jaime's book. I've got it linked in the show notes. We've got her podcast linked in the show notes. Thank you so much, Jaime. This was a really fun conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it at home as well.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
And that's it. Another great episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast for women learning how to heal from their divorce. Tune in next week for more advice and tips to help you figure out life after divorce. And until then, give yourself grace, do the best you can, and know that this is all part of the process.